NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg live from Brussels. Secretary General, thank you for being here on what is becoming a very important day in these announcements coming from the United States and NATO allies. What is your reaction to these tank announcements? How big of a moment is this?
These are important announcements, and what Chancellor Scholz, the German Chancellor, said today really is important because it makes it possible for Germany, but also for other European NATO allies, to provide Leopard 2 battle tanks to Ukraine, and that will significantly strengthen their combat capabilities, and it demonstrates also the unity and the resolve of NATO allies and partners in providing support to Ukraine.
Secretary General, the introduction of tanks has long been discussed. What did it take to get here?
What we have seen is that the front lines in Ukraine has stabilized, and we have seen how the Russians are digging in and are building fortifications. If we want Ukraine to be able both to defend against upcoming Russian offensives, and we know that the Russians are planning for new offensives, and also if we want Ukraine to be able to retake territory, we need to give them more armor, more heavy and modern weapons. And therefore I welcome the U.S. leadership, the announcements that was made last week of armored personnel carriers, of infantry fighting vehicles, and now the announcements of battle tanks that altogether will strengthen significantly the combat strength of the Ukrainian armed forces, and we need that to ensure that President Putin doesn't win this war.
There has been a view that what NATO allies have provided to this point has been enough to keep Ukraine in the fight, but not enough for Ukraine to win this war. I have heard that from retired generals, military experts for quite some time. Do you think the introduction of these tanks finally provides the capability to actually win?
So NATO allies and partners have provided unprecedented level of support to Ukraine since the start of the war. And actually many allies, including the United States, trained and supported the Ukrainians before the invasion. We have done that since 2014. This has enabled them to push the Russian forces out, first of the territory in the north around Kiev, then in the east around Kharkiv, and then in the south against Kherson. Now we see that President Putin has mobilized more than 200,000 more troops. They are ramping up production of ammunition, weapons, and they are planning new offensives. So then we need to provide even more support, not only to ensure that Ukraine survives, but actually ensure that Ukraine is able to liberate more territory, win and prevail as a sovereign independent nation in Ukraine. And that's exactly what NATO allies are doing with the announcements we saw last week, but also with the announcement of battle tanks today.
I'm hearing from some military experts already, Secretary General, that the number of tanks all put together, and while it's not entirely known what the total amount will be, but the scope of what is being promised in terms of tanks, that it is still inadequate for what Ukraine needs. What do you say to that?
So first of all, I will leave it to individual allies to make the specific announcements. But the German announcement today is important, not least also because it opens up for other European allies that have Leopard tanks to provide Leopard tanks to Ukraine. And there are many European allies that have Leopard tanks, and many of them have made it clear that they are ready to provide battle tanks to Ukraine. And I spoke just now with President Zelensky, and of course he welcomed the announcements made not only from Germany but also from many other allies to provide tanks, but also provide training, ammunition, maintenance, spare parts, the whole logistical support for these new, heavy, modern NATO standard battle tanks.
Russia's response today is that these tanks, quote, will burn just like all the others. What is your message to Russia today?
The Ukrainians have proven extremely skilled and capable in operating the equipment, the weapons NATO allies and partners have provided. And I'm absolutely certain that they will be able to do that also with main battle tanks from NATO allied countries, especially because many of them have a lot of experience already from the front lines, operating Soviet era armored vehicles, battle tanks. But of course, that is a useful background when they then start training on modern NATO battle tanks. We have to remember what this is. This is a war of aggression. President Putin invading another sovereign independent nation in Europe, Ukraine. Ukraine has the right for self-defense, and we have the right to support them in upholding that right. Because if President Putin wins, it's a tragedy for the Ukrainians, but it's also dangerous for us, because the message then is that when authoritarian leaders use military power, they get what they want, and then the world becomes even more dangerous and we more vulnerable. Therefore, it is in our security interest to support the Ukrainians.
Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg, thank you so much for coming on to react to all of these announcements happening today. I sincerely appreciate it.
Thank you.